Hi, I'm Kathy Rushing, host of the podcast Committed, the Entrepreneur Marriage. If your middle name is Restless and you identify with words like innovator, dreamer, changemaker, creative, independent, or you are married to an entrepreneur, or heaven help you, you're both entrepreneurs, this podcast is for you. The entrepreneurial journey can be a little wild at times, like uncharted territory. Join me as I talk with others who are at various stages of the entrepreneur process. We'll explore the wisdom and insights they have gained while navigating the ups and downs of the entrepreneur journey. You'll discover that there are many couples who have found ways to thrive in both their marriage and business. Shannon and Bryan Miles are the co-founders of Belay Solutions. They provide virtual support services for business owners. They were recently listed in the Inc. 5000 for the 6th year in a row. As if that achievement isn't enough, they have managed to create a thriving marriage while running Belay together. Their company has evolved since they began 10 years ago, but their focus has always been to have a great marriage, a priority they place ahead of a great business. These are my people. In the fall of 2019, they opened NoFo Brew Co. Isn't that fun to say? NoFo Brew Co. And Distillery in Cumming, Georgia. And in the year that shall not be named or repeated, God willing, they launched OwnNotRun.com, a consultancy for people in various stages of the entrepreneur journey, where they take everything they've learned to help other entrepreneurs create the life they want also. In this interview, I often start by asking couples, if your marriage was a team sport, what would it be? And we quickly got a side of Shannon and Bryan and got a little glimpse of their sense of adventure when Shannon said whitewater rafting. Not surprising, as their first date was bridge jumping in college. Like, who does that? Bryan said doubles ping pong was his analogy because you have to alternate shots and you have to work together to beat your opponent. So they kind of go from one extreme to the other, but the concept is consistent that they both dig in and do what it takes to win. The book that has affirmed their family goals is a Pat Lencioni book called 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. Shannon said the concept is that if you run your family with the same intention as your business, that families might be in a better place. If you've never read any of Lencioni's books, pull up a list and see if something resonates. His books are written as fables. They're short, easy to read, and the fable aspect makes the principles really easy to remember and apply. Shannon and Bryan are some of the most down-to-earth people I've met. I really enjoyed this interview with them. Their advice comes from hard work they've done and their commitment to having a great marriage, no matter what life throws at them. Bryan and Shannon met in college. They actually figured out that they met a few years before, but their official meeting was during college. When Bryan's dad was diagnosed with lung cancer, Bryan decided to leave school, work full-time, and finish college by taking night classes. He took on the responsibilities. I always want to say responsibilities. Remember the Rugrats? I don't know. That was a long time ago. Anyway, he took on these responsibilities of adulthood quickly, knowing that nothing was going to be handed to him. They married just out of college, figuring that whatever was ahead, they would figure it out together. Well, not long after they married, they lost his dad and Shannon's stepdad, both to lung cancer within a year of each other. It was really hard, and as Shannon said, they raised each other in those early days. but they learn to put the needs of the other first, dying to self, Bryan said. This might be one of the hardest parts of marriage, no matter what age people marry. And the concept of dying to self may not be a term that you're familiar with. In the Christian faith, which Bryan and Shannon practice, there are many teachings about loving others by serving them well, whether that's a spouse, a child, a coworker, or a neighbor. The paradox of dying to self in order to have the most full life is what Bryan is referring to. If this is not your faith tradition, then you might just focus on understanding the needs and personality of your partner. No matter how much you have in common, you are two very different people, and it requires a lot of give and take to create a marriage that works for both of you. Some of the most distressed marriages I've seen are ones where each party only sees things from their perspective. So no matter, what faith tradition or no faith tradition, I think this is a really important principle to apply to your marriage, is to look for the needs of your partner and how can you put them first. And the irony is that you end up, it becomes a beautiful circle. You give, your partner gives in return, and it just, round and round it goes. And it's a beautiful give and take when it's done unselfishly. Well, fast forward about 10 years, and with 2 young kids, Shannon and Bryan decided to leave jobs that they enjoyed and had taught them a lot, but they weren't having the lifestyle they wanted. Bryan was traveling a lot and was never home, and it just wasn't working for them now that they had kids. They spent a couple of months talking with others about starting a business to provide virtual support to business owners. And then they did what any rational couple would do. They cashed out their 401ks, and on the same day, October 1st of 2010, they both resigned their jobs to start this new venture. Many of the couples that I interview only have one entrepreneur in the family, and this can be challenging enough. But Bryan and Shannon took the leap together, both fully invested in the success of this venture. They had one failed venture behind them already, a mortgage company that didn't survive. Fortunately, they were both still working at the time. But 2010, when they launched Belay, was new territory. They were all in, and it was very demanding at first, as are all startups. But I want to point out a couple of things that contributed to their success. First thing is celebrating their differences. By the time they launched, they knew a lot about each other's personality, the strengths they each brought to the table, and areas where they could default to the other. They have very different personalities in some ways, and Shannon said after years of being together and a lot of counseling, to quote her, she said, "We stopped trying to make each other the other person, and that made all the difference." She said, it sounds so simple, but it really took us quite a while to learn that. I see this a lot, especially in the early days of marriage. More women seem to have high expectations that their spouse will like everything they like. They'll handle conflict the same. They'll want to take the same type of vacations. And there is a lot of conflict around these differences, and they keep trying to make the other one like them. Oftentimes, these unspoken expectations creep in, and they become the argument that a couple has over and over and over until they can finally recognize, accept, and even celebrate the fact that they are very different people and they bring different perspectives to the marriage. And that, in fact, is what keeps a marriage exciting and interesting. It would be super dull to be married to yourself, wouldn't it? So the second thing I noticed in this conversation with them is that their priorities were right-sized. Let me explain that. Bryan said from the beginning, their priority was to have a great marriage. I mean, how many entrepreneurial couples start that way? He said that it's easy to give accidental priority to the business, especially in the early days, because it just seems so big and there's so much to do. But Bryan and Shannon processed the worst case scenario. And as they considered that before they launched their business, they decided that the worst case scenario was, would their marriage be okay? Because again, their main outcome was not to have a great business. The business supported the things they wanted to accomplish as a family. Okay, the third thing that was a great takeaway, something that Shannon shared, is a tool that they learned to use along the way when there was conflict, and especially evolving the business. You can imagine, you just never leave it. They worked from home, and so it was always there. But what they learned is to get on the same side of the line. Think of drawing a line and you both are on the same side of the line and the problem is on the other side of the line. She suggested even drawing a picture of it or doing something to symbolize that problem and set it there in front of you and then name it and then talk about how are we going to address this problem. And that's how you come to figure it out together and not fight each other. You know, your partner is not the enemy, but this problem over here is what we're going to work on and address. The fourth thing that was very important to them, they said, was having mentors. They had people they would consult for specific issues. I think Shannon said she had been part of C12 for a while, but that it evolved into a different type of mentoring group. And Bryan said also that not all mentors are created equal. Some have great business advice, but they haven't been able to sustain a healthy marriage, so that's not who they ask for marriage advice. So you might find yourself having different mentors in different seasons or for different issues, but definitely having people that would come alongside them and help them with some of the difficult issues that came up around their business or in their marriage was very helpful for them. That's what I have as the takeaways. If you have time, I would love for you to catch the full interview with Bryan and Shannon. They were really delightful and very encouraging. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps others find this resource. You're building a life together. Make it a great one. See you next time.